Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this Friday afternoon I'm delighted to be joined by Chris McElwain. Loads to catch up on, Chris. We're going to be talking about this weekend's action, of course, following on from the comfortable win against Hearts at the weekend, everything else that's happening. I've noticed over the last few days, loads and loads of transfer talk already. It feels a little bit premature, doesn't it? I know behind the scenes, Celtic will be doing all that work. But it's like if you're linked to somebody today in April, can you really get excited about them? Because we're going to go through dozens of players before we actually get a name that ends up in hoops.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, some of the names you see links, you do get excited, but I think we should be well trained by now as a support base to not get too ahead of ourselves. We know that transfer windows can be great. We know they can be horrible. In recent years, we've had a fair few experiences over the past couple of seasons on that front. But I think what we we are allowed to have is a little bit of faith in the manager and his staff. I think we've started to see a creep towards having a very successful recruitment model. Um, Not just in terms of the players we're bringing in, but actually looking to retain certain players, which I think is great. I noticed there's a few articles talking today about how important it is to keep a player like Dyson Maeda. And I think, while our model, our recruitment model, whereby we buy for relatively low fees and we sell on for big fees, it's got us into a really strong financial position. Surely one of the objectives of that is to get to the point where we're sustainable or self-sufficient when it comes to the finances within the club, and we don't necessarily have that requirement to sell our best players. Okay, I mean, if players want to go and we get good fees, then obviously there's a decision to be made. But I think we're in a good position as a club where we don't have to sell our best players and continually look for the next big thing. What I think we're now in a position is we've made progress both on the park in terms of Europe. We're in a great position financially. The club are investing in the infrastructure. So now's maybe the time where what we start doing is we start to augment that existing quality we've got in the park with more quality rather than replace quality because they're going out.
Well, the big thing for me as well is there's always, and Brendan Rodgers has touched on this, there's always going to be occasions where a player comes to the end of his life cycle, if you like, with Celtic. And if that happens, then it's best for everybody for them to move on rather than always be looking to sell your best player.
Yep.
Dyson Maeda doesn't seem to be looking like he's going to go anywhere, which is good news for us. We are going to have our own arrival just in a second.
Right.
I'm just going to get this screen set up, and it's Brian Degnan joining us on this Friday afternoon. There he is.
You must have heard the
Brian,
word quality, bringing quality in, and Brian appears. How about that?
quality acquisitions. And then Brian appears as if by magic. There you go. How you doing, Brian? We're just talking about the incredible amount of transfer speculation, and it's only April. I can't get excited with too many of these names because you know how many you go through until you actually get to the point where you sign one of them. So I get it, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have shows between now and the beginning of next season where we dedicate it to who we're obviously linked with. But at this moment in time, I'm just so busy focusing on the game, the next game, the treble, and all this kind of stuff. What's your feelings about it? Do you get excited in April when it's transfer speculation, or is it just filling the column inches?
I get excited about everything. To be fair, I'm an excitable chap at the best of times, but to be honest, I'm sort of maybe a bit more concerned with losing players, if I'm honest. And I suggest that's probably what you were talking about there before I arrived late. But I think it's we're so jaded with Celtic transfer windows, right? That you're always sort of. I'm almost more interested in not as much who we sign, but how we sign them, how efficiently we go about it. Who we're targeting. This is when it gets to the last minute loan deals that kills me every single time. So I'm almost more excited about, have we improved the process? Does it look like we're being more efficient? Have we learned the lessons? That's the sort of stuff I'm eager to see the first couple of weeks. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we get the players we need in at that stage. That would be great. But certainly what I want to see is there's a strategy in place and there's a thought process behind it, as opposed to, this guy's at a contract and he used to play in the Premier League, or Brendan worked with this guy a couple of years ago, or there's some guy we've been linked with for the past 10 years, or maybe Paddy Roberts is going to come back. Whatever it is the newspaper comes up with, I'm less interested in that in a way. And I think as well, just to add, the squad's in a really good place actually. Like, and sometimes when you dig in, you can sort of go, well, we only need 2 players, and then you go, actually, we probably need 3. Well, if they leave, then we need 4 or 5. But I think the squad's such a healthy place that I'm not panicking about the window. You know, I'm thinking we need a few key players in a couple of positions, and I'm willing to be patient till that comes in. If we needed a big rebuild, and it felt like last year there was a lot of work being done. It feels like less so this year. But again, I'm sure we discussed that over the course of the coming weeks.
Do you think that was the main reason, really, about the reaction to Jeff Sloop coming in initially? It was the way we did it, Brian. You're talking about the way we're doing business. When you look at Sloop, and again, it's a point of discussion. Some people say during the week that they wouldn't keep him. I definitely would. It's the way we did that business, Brian, wasn't it? It wasn't really the player himself. We've obviously, well, you can read between the lines. We've gone down to London to get the Tierney deal over the line. The Tierney deal hasn't got over the line. We've obviously signed him in the least exciting way possible. We announced it, buried within the financials. Oh, by the way, Kieran Tierney signed a pre-contract. We hadn't even announced it, and then now it's just getting discussed by Brendan Rodgers whenever he's talking about acquisitions. And whilst we're down there, we bring up Jeffrey Sloop as well on a short-term loan deal. So it's the way that we did that rather than the player itself. And that is why it was a wee bit underwhelming, Brian. I would agree with that.
And I think you can say the same about Kasper Schmeichel. He was an absolutely sensational signing, but I think even hinting himself that Brendan gave him a ring and asked him to come down. And I'm not sure that's how you want a progressive, modernised, super slick, enterprising football club to be run. However, you can't deny that what an absolutely stellar signing. And I wouldn't say Sloop's a stellar signing, but certainly for me, I agree with you, Paul. I don't know your view, Chris, but I think it's a no-brainer to have him in. I think he's shown up well. I think he performed well in the Champions League. I think he can play a number of positions. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to remember that he's also no longer in the building. So he has been adjusting as well and sort of being thrown in, given the fact that Greg Taylor's off. So I think if we could keep him, as long as he's not asking for crazy amounts of money, although that would be offset against the transfer fee, I don't think we're going to pay money for a backup player as good as him or as experienced. I think it's like one of those questions we always ask about McGregor as well. It's like, how much would it cost you to get a player of McGregor's ability? Mm-hmm. Well, we couldn't afford it. So exactly. That's why McGregor, when he says undroppable, but that's why he's still such a key player, because he's so good and he's almost better than we could afford in a lot of ways. And again, I'm not saying necessarily Sloop falls into that, but I think you could apply the same logic. So for me, he'd be an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah, again, you're talking about how you structure the deal as well, Brian. There's no transfer fee, of course. Whatever he's on at Crystal Palace, people keep saying, but he's on that. Yeah, he's on that money just now at Crystal Palace. At the end of the season, he doesn't have any income, so he needs to renegotiate a new deal with a new club. I'm pretty sure there'll be offers when you look at the stature of that type of player, and there will be opportunities for him to go to a place where he can make a lot of money. And it's not about the trophies; it's just about a financial thing. But if he wants to be a success at Celtic, if he buys into that, there could be a signing-on fee. Obviously, we could structure the deal slightly differently to make sure that he's happy and the club are happy. I don't even see him as a backup. Brendan Rodgers has been talking about the left-back situation. It's kind of come to light, Chris, that Greg Taylor, whether or not he has agreed a deal elsewhere, who knows? That's his right, being within the last 6 months of his deal. But Brendan Rodgers is talking about him being out the club next season. He likes him. He said he likes him as a player and also as a person at the football club as well. But he's going and Tierney's coming in. I'm happy with that. And I think that Sloop, in terms of his adaptability to a number of positions, I absolutely bring him into the squad. I think he would be a tremendous acquisition. Now, we're talking about left backs. We're going to be moving on back onto somebody else. Brian mentioned Kasper Schmeichel, and who is, between the sticks in his absence, because none other than our double denim was with Cinny Sallow this morning. I mean, he's the busiest working man in showbiz, is Chris McElwain. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about what you were up to last night. As I said, showbiz, just schmoozing with your showbiz buddies. But before we do all that, we spoke about our concerns about the leak. The leak being, the team being leaked out. But there was a leak last night. I don't know what to think about kit leaks, right? Because sometimes I think it's part of the strategy. I really do, especially when they're quite early doors, right? I sometimes think it would be a good way, Chris, for a manufacturer like Adidas to put a couple of templates out there just to see what the reaction's like, This seems to be that there was maybe some kind of a photo shoot at Celtic Park. It's Celtic Park because it's got the carpet, one or more of the suites under the feet of Jota. And he's wearing what looks like, well, it's actually a new away jersey. It's a new away jersey because I was speaking to someone in the know last night and they were telling me that the trefoil is going to be reserved for the third kit. We're going to get the Adidas, the classic trefoil for the third kit. This is the away kit. It's been confirmed by the same source. This is the away kit for next season. Now, I'm a traditionalist. And I like my jerseys without a sponsor. I know it's a necessary evil in the modern day. That jersey is going to look brilliant without a sponsor. The one thing I would change, and again, I'm a traditionalist, I would love the full colour crest. I always like a full colour crest. I think it works better. They'll tell us different. The designers will say that this works better. That's just me. That's just my opinion. I quite like it. It's very much like the current yellow away kit in its design, but obviously with a different colourway. Chris McElwain, what's your thoughts? I know most things look good on this guy. What's your thoughts?
Well, I've got to be honest. I think the disappointing thing about the image is there's no double denim to go around this shirt, and it's Jota. I mean, what a missed opportunity, as far as I'm concerned. I'm all for Jota's style sense, but when I saw him with the baggy trousers there, I thought this looks like a pair of Celtic pajamas. I wasn't 100% sure about it, but actually, when you take the shirt in isolation, and it needs a wee bit of an iron. That's the housewife in me.
The jersey. You don't put an iron on a jersey.
It needs a wee bit of press, right? It needs to be a wee bit more. For me, it needs to be a wee bit more figure hugging. But there's a couple of elements I really like on it. I really like the collar design, and a few of the guys have spoken about. I think Brian picked up on that as well. I actually like the colours. It does harken back to some of the darker kits that we had in the 90s. In fact, one of which appeared on stage at Jim's show last night, which I'll talk about. Again, I agree with you. I like the shirts without a sponsor. I think it just looks more kind of old school, a bit more retro, and it's an aesthetic thing that I really like. But I think the real test will be when you see it as a full kit, when you see it with the shorts, you see it with the socks. Not sure what colours they'll be. Is it going to be kind of all dark with maybe the lime green, and about it? But I think it's an okay effort. It's. I know a lot of people are looking for something closer to the old Bumblebee shirt, and there was a lot of talk about that designer becoming as part of the Adidas line. But I quite like it. I think it'll look good on parks. And it's enough of a departure from the hoops to hopefully avoid having all these conflicting shirt styles against opposition and things like that. So yeah, I'll reserve judgment. I wouldn't say I love it yet, but I'm prepared to give it a chance.
The thing is, it's just luck that we have the Acsom style guru on the Friday that we're talking about a new kit.
Right.
But talking about putting an iron on a football jersey, that is just sacrilegious. I remember back in my primary school days, I went to Sacred Heart in Pennycook. No, I didn't support an Edinburgh team, the Flying Haggis. I didn't support my local team back then either. But what actually happened was there was two guys who ended up getting a game. Sorry, lads, if you're listening in because you were Celtic fans, but they ended up getting a game for the school team because their dad sponsored the team. Did anybody have a similar experience when they played football as a kid, where their dad had a few quid and they would sponsor the team? All of a sudden, the kids started getting a game, but they were absolutely rotten. Sorry, lads. Anyway, the father ran a wine shop, ladies and gents. So at primary school, we were advertising wine on the front of our jerseys. And basically what happened is the headmaster ran a team because Johnny didn't want to. Nobody wanted to wash the kit, so you had to wash your own, which meant that about 3 or 4 weeks into the season, there was iron marks all over the jerseys, lads. All over the jerseys. Brian, I can't see your reaction to that, but I know as a modern man that you would not put an iron on a football jersey. Am I right?
Listen, I barely put an iron on an actual jersey. Never mind a football one. That's why I've got a lot of hoodies these days, so I just fire them over. In terms of the kit itself, do you know what it reminds me of? You know when there's like a blockbuster movie coming out, like the new Avengers movie or something, and you always get these behind the scenes snaps, and it's like Chris Pratt standing, and he's all in a purple lycra suit with balls over him, and it just everything looks a bit crap until you see it in the cinema and you go, oh, that's what it is. This photo's the same. It's like it's Jota kicking about, quite a funny angle, laughing, with shady baggy cords on, and
Yes.
this jersey just at the bag, so it's not presented in its best light. But I quite like it. I like the collar shape. I like the piping, and I think it looked really good long sleeve. I've actually quite enjoyed it, and I've been up and down with the Adidas kits. Like I like Adidas as a brand, and I love this season's home kit. It's one of my favourite home kits. I absolutely love it. But I hated some of the other ones. You know, with when they had the V-neck, and it was class, but then they had the stupid grey lines, and then they had that other one that had the dark green sort of ruined hoops. So they're a bit up and down, but I quite like it. I think it'll be good. As I say, I'm sure when Jota's monitoring it properly, we'll all change our mind.
Exactly. So, yeah. So I mean, the reaction is it's one of these shots that wasn't meant to happen. Jota obviously knows he's getting his photograph taken. That's obviously then circulated like wildfire last night. It does remind me of this, lads. It puts me in mind of this jersey. First player you think of, Chris, when you see that top?
Oh, do you know what? The first one that came to mind was Stephen Mahey.
Stephen Mahey. Well, obviously it was the game where Henrik broke his leg against Lyon. We were wearing the jersey.
Do you know? I've blocked that out of my memory. That's why.
No wonder. No wonder. That was a horrible night. You know, the first guy I think of, Brian's Vida Riseth when I see that jersey. What about you, Brian? That one there?
I was going to say Lambo, but I think I'm just. It's, you know what it is? It's the badge in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what always mixes me up. But I like I really like the dark jerseys. Is the away jersey? So my favourite ever away jersey was and I can picture Larson in a photo running, and it's the black with the gold piping.
I was going to say it's the gold one. Yeah,
I think it was the year after Seville.
That's right.
So 2004-05, I think.
First Celtic jersey ever to have the Lisbon star on it as well, above the crest.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Every day's a school day. But no, I always like that. I like the collar. I always think collar's a bit gallus. Like, I'm absolutely, for regular viewers will know, I'm absolutely garbage at football, right? Love playing it.
What did you do the Cantona thing anyway?
I always have the collar up. Long sleeves, collar up, sleeves up. Just want to look like a wee idol.
Socks at the ankles. Oh, yeah.
And I get past the bonnet, just stands in tears. The illusion's gone after about 35 seconds. I like the part at first, and it all fades away quickly.
But Brian, at least you're honest. Normally when you speak to people, they were like, I had a trial at this time. Oh, it could have been me. Honestly, how many times do you hear
that? Bad injury, I'd have been at Barcelona, I'm telling you.
Oh, my God. Then this arrived. Yeah, look at that carpet. I wonder where that could be. And this is a range, of course, of Adidas merch for Celtic. And it's got the old trefoil on it. Which for the trainer perverts amongst us and the Adidas perverts amongst us, it's one of these things that you do hope that it returns, and it's all about elite brands and all that kind of stuff now, Chris. So you need to be in a certain band to get the trefoil. I like some of this stuff. I used to like the old drills, which is the top right, I think. You know, it was like wearing a cardboard box when you were training. You remember them, lads? Oh my God, so that's what that looks like. I've got to say, top left looks pretty vintage. I like the look of that, you know, with the unbroken.
It's got an 80s vibe. Yeah.
That
1980s, I do like that, yeah.
It does. But there you go. 40-something gentlemen speak about fashion on a Friday on Acsom. Who's going to listen to us? Probably no one. Anyway, there you go. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing it. And then jerseys look different when they're on the pitch getting worn as well. Chris, am I right in saying that the yellow one, which I'm a massive fan of that we wear right now, you didn't like that when we first seen the pictures?
I didn't. I felt it was too close to a kind of Norwich strip. It's grown on me. It's one of these ones that, as you see the players playing in it, you kind of think, actually, that works quite well. When I first saw it, I would have liked it to be just plain yellow, which again, quite Norwich, almost Wolves-like. But I wasn't that keen on it. It looked too busy for me. But as I say, when you see the players out playing in it, and you know. I do think it looks better on a player than it does on a rack or anything like that. So I have to say I do quite like it. Nothing, however, no player is ever going to make that version of the hoops they did last year look good. The one with the kind of lizard print. That's got to be for me. Put it in the bin. Never come out again.
The lizard print. Yes. Yeah. How often will we refer to any design to the old stained glass window that appeared back in the day, pre-1987, above the entrance to Celtic Park? I think we've kind of done that one to the nth degree now, gents, if anybody's listening. Yeah, I quite like it, and it's all about opinions, absolutely. Now, Chris has been a busy guy, Brian. He just goes to like the opening of a fridge door these days. He was at the press conference today for Acsom. We'll be sharing that on the socials for everybody who follows us on all the multitude of socials that are out there. I'm just waiting for the next one to be launched. Yes, we will clip it up, and it was with Sinisalo. So let's start off with that, because obviously he will be starting another game this weekend. We'll come to the press conference in a moment. How impressed have you been with him? I know there isn't much to speak of, Brian, but he's stepped into the berth and he's done pretty well so far, isn't he?
Yeah, he's looked comfortable. It's always going to be a hard act to follow Casper on the ball. I think that's it's always weird seeing that about a keeper, right? But I think it's one of the things that he does best. His distribution is excellent. But Sinisalo looks fairly comfortable. He's not the physically most imposing looking, but I think he's got a bit of presence about him. He looks like a confident guy. Really good speaker. Seems to enjoy it. He's obviously waited patiently. Rodgers likes him. So I think, to be honest, at this stage of the season, you know, once the league's wrapped up officially, we should be looking to rotate anyway and give guys like him, you know, Dane Murray, Narowski obviously is coming through injury, but give these guys most of the games just to see what they can offer for next season. Anything you're not sure about or you want to test, that's when you do it anyway. So I'd like to have seen some rotation towards this part of the season anyway. It's a shame it's come at the expense of Casper's injury, but it can only be good for Sinisalo, right? It gives him the chance to put himself there, to be the keeper that sees the league over the line. You know, get a big game at Ibrox, and then obviously the cup run. So a lot for him to play for, and a lot for him to stake his case. And I think, you know, we spoke right at the start of the show actually about strategy and how we go about transfers, and that actually seemed the thing that we were quite impressed with actually when we signed Sinisalo and Schmeichel, because we went, okay, we've got an older guy, very experienced international, and a guy to learn from him for the future. So it felt like actually that was a step in the right direction, and we'll get to see it now. I think my fear was when we found out Schmeichel was injured, I thought if Scott Bain starts, that's Sinisalo off.
Yeah.
But the fact he's no is a relief in a number of fronts. But I'm glad he's come in, and I think he's done well so far, certainly.
That's an interesting point, Brian. And I don't think we've spoken about that since the news came through that Schmeichel had been injured in that international against Portugal. Had Benzo started the game, you would have looked at that series of transfers in the summer completely differently at that stage. You would have then started thinking, was it a club signing rather than a Brendan signing? Is it as well planned as you've just described with regards to the experience versus the youth? So, yeah, absolutely. A question was answered there when Sinisalo stepped up and started the game, because Benzo has got loads of experience. He's also got loads of experience warming the bench. And he's adding to that. I cannot wait for his testimonial. Not sure who we're going to play. But you're right, it's a really good point. Not every one of us has, you know, the ability, never mind the opportunity to rub shoulders with people like Sinisalo. But that indeed was what you did this morning, Chris, with the press conference. And as I say, we're going to be sharing the clips rather than just dump it onto the YouTube channel. We'll share the clips on the socials. Talk us through it. How was it? You were saying earlier on, confident fella?
Just to echo what Brian said, and it was very apparent when I spoke to him. It comes across very, very confidently, very articulate for such a young man. Was very responsive to the questions as well. What was quite interesting is he validated the perception that when he was signed, he was very much signed to learn from Kasper Schmeichel. And one of the things that he outlined was the effect that working close with Kasper has had since he's joined the club. Kasper was actually one of his personal heroes, and he'd worked with great goalkeepers down at Villa previously. But he said coming up here, having having Kasper and his knowledge and his experience accessible has really allowed him to adapt to the club, adapt to the manager's requirements, understand the expectations of the team and the way they play, and obviously learn what it means to be a Celtic player and play under that continual pressure. So he really appreciates the relationship that he's built up with Kasper, so he's very, very grateful for that. Obviously, while he's been patient and waited for his opportunity, he's always been keen to come on and show what he can do, but not obviously at the expense of Kasper being injured. So he spoke a bit about that. He spoke about the requirements on young modern goalkeepers now to not just be that last line of defence, but actually to be the first point of attack. How that feeds into Brendan's model for Celtic. And he said that actually is now becoming a more common requirement for young goalkeepers. So he's quite comfortable with the ball at his feet. He's quite comfortable in playing the ball out and making sure, as I write in my office, making sure that he actually transitions, the game from defence into attack. And what was quite interesting, I asked him to reflect on, from his perspective, how did his debut go? And he's very, very honest and very self-aware. And he said, look, it was great, really good to get a touch on the ball early. That calms you down under those circumstances. He spoke about the first 10 minutes and being under a bit of pressure, but actually coming through that period. And then, he referenced the fact that, Brendan has spoken about his concentration, how important it is when you're a Celtic player and a Celtic goalkeeper to have that continual concentration, because you're not going to be tested throughout the 90 minutes. There'll be periods where you're essentially just having to watch for the game and be ready when the occasion comes. But he did point to the fact, he said, look, it was my first appearance. Think, overall great to have a clean sheet. But even he sees areas where he wants to improve, distribution, areas where he wants to, develop as he goes further. And he said, look, the opportunity to have minutes will allow me to do that. So very, very confident in his own ability, very self-aware, which was great. But he exudes a confidence for someone that's only 23 years old, a real confidence. And sometimes you look at a player and you think, God, he's just happy to be there. I got the impression from Sinisalo that he's ready to be called upon. And even if Kasper comes back in towards the end of the season, maybe for the bigger games, I get the impression he sees his future as taking over from Kasper when Kasper eventually does decide to call it a day. So, yeah, really privileged to be there. Very, very impressed again with the player. And hopefully he goes on and picks up his performance from as we go into the weekend.
And where are you and Declan McConville meeting him for a coffee later this afternoon, Chris?
I can't say.
He's taken over from the schmoozing professional, which was Declan McConville, Brian, isn't he?
That's a hard act to follow. To be honest. I'm actually surprised Declan wasn't in that leaked picture with Jota. To be honest.
Declan took it. Right, here we go. Right, some comments, and then we'll get snuck into all the other matters. It sounds great, and as I say, I love these press conferences because you get out a sense of the player as well pretty quickly. I think that there are certain players who don't really want to give too much away. There's others who love just sitting there and chatting. I always remember being involved in one of the conferences with Jota when we first signed him on loan. You forget sometimes. So we signed him on loan, and I was speaking to him, and I asked him about Lisbon. I just had to speak to him about Lisbon. I know you were there recently, Brian. Some great pictures as well. The pilgrimage that so many Celtic fans make to that beautiful, special place. And he was just like really open, and he was quite happy to just answer anything. And that then led into the fact that he had kind of been a mascot, hadn't he, at one of the games against Celtic and all this kind of stuff for Benfica. And you're looking at the Jota that we brought in initially, and then you look at how that kind of changed between signing him on a permanent, then he goes to, and then we see that brilliant goodbye video and all this kind of stuff. And then it all gone off the rails for him. And he is now the man who is part of the tagline for today. I know that he's on your wall behind you there, Chris. And it's all about Jota hitting peak form. Now, before I go on to a comment in relation to that, the Flying Haggis, come on, there's a virtual hug for you, mate. You're off the naughty step. Everybody needs to take a wee bit of time on that naughty step, but you always come back in. You always come back into the huddle. There you go. I felt for me. You say that I was necessary.
To be fair, as someone who transitioned from being a commenter on and coming on here, I do appreciate that sometimes you try and put a point across and it doesn't necessarily always land the way you intend it to. So I haven't seen a lot of the comments Haggis has made in the past, even when times when I've hosted. He comes across as a good guy. I just think that one didn't land maybe
what have you said about us before you joined, Chris? I'm
going to check.
That was a big defence there. There must have been some nasty.
You're not allowed to go back. You're not allowed to go back. All right.
Like I can check your previous history. I can do that. I have the admin that can do that. No, listen, I don't take it at all as an insult. But in terms of the Celtic support, we're a broad church, and we attract fans, not just the diaspora, but we attract fans all over the globe. I just need to have a look at the analytics on YouTube. That kind of thing interests me far too much to see who tunes in. It's unbelievable, and I love to hear when people are tuning in from all over the planet. William Milligan is actually watching on X. First time I've caught you live from the Philippines. That just blows me away that somebody in the Philippines is tuning in. I think it's incredible. And you're hearing strong rumours from inside Celtic. Hatate and Kunarovsky, two midfielders and a right winger on the menu. I've not really heard anything. I've got a really good source, one that if he told me something was happening, I know it's going to happen. And I've not really heard anything along those lines. But when I do, I'll certainly share it. In relation to Jota, and I want to talk a wee bit more about it, and I've got this belief that Jota is just going to click into place, right? And I think it's not quite happened yet. By the way, I don't think he's been bad since we signed him. He's probably ahead of what a lot of people thought he would be in terms of his performances, right? And the reason for that was the lack of, competitive football for 18 months. And not just that, the disappointment of how things turned out when he made this big money move to Saudi. And then obviously being thrown in a scrap heap, and then he goes to France, and the same thing happens really. Now that can batter you. Imagine your confidence at that stage where you're thinking you're getting an escape route from that, and then it doesn't happen again. And then you're having to go back to a place where I think is like it's going to feel almost as if a safe place for him, coming back to Celtic and playing in front of these fans. And that's the reason for me, Brian, I'm going to throw this one over to you first, that when he scores that first goal, when there's that emotion, and he actually cries when celebrating the goal, and anybody who's been paying attention knew why, right? And now I'm not making any assumptions in relation to his mental health, but basically there's an emotion there that it's clear for everyone to see. And you could quite clearly link that to the tough time he'd had in his professional career in the previous 18 months. And it's like brilliant, because that's real. That's none of your nonsense. That's the real deal. It's not like the plastic football that we see where people have got, preempted celebrations and all this kind of stuff. And there's, the majority of the crowd that actually got their phones trained on them. This was the real deal. It was just like a frenzy of arms and all this kind of stuff. And there's Jota, and we all understood what it meant to him. It amazed me at the time that two Scottish pundits didn't understand what it meant to him. I thought that was bizarre at the time. So that's my thinking behind it, Brian. And I think the reason he's not clicked 100% yet is because he's been building up not just physically, but also mentally with regards to his confidence to get back into the Jota of old, the Jota that earned him that big money move. That's where I am with Jota. And I think that we can talk about Kuhn and Maeda being head-to-head for periods this season for Player of the Year. At the moment, obviously, Maeda's lapped him a couple of times now, and he's right at the forefront. We're not really talking about the other part of that trio up top, and that is Jota. I think he's going to click as much as anybody in the running.
100%, yeah. So just on Jota, sort of taking it for the beginning. So absolutely delighted he came back. My missus actually saw he was back. She's like, "Oh, your boyfriend's back." I absolutely love him, and I think that on the pundits sort of no understanding that him getting emotional during a game. You know, they're two pundits who I don't think understand much about anything, to be honest. Like, I think they still write on crayon, so I wouldn't get too upset about their opinion, either of them. And I think I love that passion from them. I think so many players and so many times football isn't real. You know, people, they say things. It's like you talked about press conferences. You know, and remember Robbie Keane? He had about 14 favourite childhood clubs. You know, it was always the same pattern every time. And you see these players, and it's cookie cutter, and yeah, they're well trained, they're good speakers, but you know, they're just telling you what they think you want to hear and stuff. Jota's always came across as someone who's kind of real, just sort of says, you know, he's not controversial, but he just sort of replies the way he thinks he should reply. And I think seeing that emotion, I love that. Listen, if I scored for Celtic, I'd burst into tears. You know, if I watched a sad film, I'd burst into tears. Do you know, I appreciate that passion in people, and I think that there's not enough times we show that. And actually, what I think that shows us an incredibly strong mentality. Not just that reaction, but the fact he came back. The fact he came back for disappointment, and I think he's come back. And I think he's actually performed a bit better than I expected, because I thought he was going to have to get phased in. And I think it's sheer mentality. I think sheer determination to prove that I'm not coming back here for a holiday. I'm never taking this for granted again. I'm here to be successful and to prove it and to thrive and to reward getting that chance to come back. And I think that's where you're seeing. So I think physically he's nowhere near it. I think he's very slight looking. He needs to bulk up a bit, much like Kuhn did when he first arrived. I think he needs to get his fitness up a bit. You know, we know what Brendan sort of demands for the players in terms of fitness, so he needs to get there, and then just get used to playing again every week. But I think sheer mentality, sheer drive from him is what's key. And I think when you look at guys around the team with a similar mentality, I think Alistair Johnson's like that. I think there's times, you know, where his form's good or bad, he's really strong character, real leader. And I think actually, as well as the Jota, with the flair, with the goals, with the taking people on, with contributing to the team, I think you're going to start to see a real leader improve and develop. And yeah, I'm absolutely glad he's back home. And look, how long he stays, we don't know. Circumstances can change very quickly in football, but I think he's back. I think he's back for the right reasons, and you can't get enough guys like that in your squad, whether he cries or not.
No, you're right. I mean, the sheer emotion, and it's interesting, Brian, you say that. We started off with that introductory press conference that he was at. You're absolutely right. These things can be run of the mill. You know, people have got stock answers, and often, I always remember it, fantasy football, Skinner and Badil used to talk about it, and they would break it down, and it was all these kind of things that footballers said, and they always bunched up players. Like, there was only one Kenny Dalglish, and there was only one Davy Hay, but if you were talking about them, it's the Dalglishes and the Hayes, and it's like, no, there was only one of them. And then they showed the footballers doing it, and then you're like, actually, footballers do that, and it's part of the parlance that they just add that in. But really,
that sketch in Burniston, they're talking to the football manager, and he's kind of doing a Jim McLean thing, and the guy says, you know, what happened at the park? And he says, well, just a club like us, Burniston FC, we can't sign the Wayne Rooneys of the world. And the reporter says, aye, but surely you can sign all the Wayne Rooneys. You don't need to sign that Wayne Rooney. Surely sign a different Wayne Rooney. And he ends up, he just thumps him. Just brilliant. And then just reports him ahead as well. Remember the talk about people being real in press conferences? You remember James McCarthy's press conference?
Oh, man.
Where he done this sort of weird Brendan Rodgers impression about halfway through. Just a wee bit of training. And then it's so weird. Like, it was amazing. That's what I popped into my head.
Played a couple of games. The interesting thing with that is I clipped them up, and I struggled to get a single clip out of that entire press conference. But I will be using the Sirisallo one later on. But you're right; it was more genuine. It was real, Brian. Where a lot of that kind of has been lost in the modern game. One of the conversations that we had with regards to this Friday show, tonight's show, This Is Acsom. The guest is Frank McAvenny. So Frank McAvenny's been very supportive of Acsom from the early days. Kevin Graham will never, ever forget our meeting at the toll booth in Stirling. No laughing at the back, Chris.
No.
McAvenny Frank also contributed to various things, came to my book launch, you know, for my first book, the Quality Street Gang. He contributed to the Celtic Smeller documentary. Always helped us out. And he's always great fun when we're doing live events and stuff like that. So we were actually talking off camera, and it was a discussion that he had on his latest show as well in relation to the demise, if you like, of Only an Excuse. And one of the things he said, because obviously his character is one of the most famous characters, right? And you had the catchphrase and all the rest of it. But one of the reasons he reckons is that you would need to regurgitate a lot of the material because there's so few characters in Scottish football these days. And I think he's got a point. Everything, it's almost as if like there's your stock answers. Everybody's trained to an nth degree to just be a character rather than be themselves. So it's refreshing when you get somebody like Jota who's not scared to show that emotion. I used to love the celebration of Peter Grant in the 2-2 draw at Ibrox in the centenary season. Right? Not just the fact that he blessed himself, not just that, although that was great. He's greeting. He's actually crying and he's screaming. He's screaming at the heavens that Terry Butcher has just scored an own goal. Sorry, Peter. And then what I then found, and I still find this absolutely bizarre, is that a poster of Peter Grant then made its way onto the cell wall of Dirty Den.
EastEnders, yeah, Dirty Den.
He's on his knees giving it that, and Dirty Den, and it was 1987-88, and he was in.
Tells that story every event. He tells that story.
He was on EastEnders for 6 weeks. Incredible, absolutely incredible. So yeah, we're loving Jota. Now I'm going to bring this up, Ridiculizer. I love a wee bit of disagreement with your good self. You're always welcome back. It's nothing personal. I'd never ever take it personally. Why is a professional footballer only hitting top form in April? It's disgraceful. I think you bring it down to the fact that he never really played. Now you can train and train and train. But if you're not playing in a competitive game, Chris, you're never going to get that match sharpness.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just 6 or 7 weeks. It was a year and a half. Plus the disappointment of the moves, obviously going to Saudi, uprooting everything, going over there, no working out, then trying France, no working out, coming back here. So I think I'm probably in the same camp as Brian. I didn't expect him even to be at this kind of level of performance at this stage, Chris. And that's why I'm saying, right, I might have expected him to come good last 2-3 weeks of the season, business end of the season, hopefully with a Scottish Cup final on the horizon. And I'm looking at it just now and thinking, no, actually, he's going to be a key player for us now, in the here and now. There's going to be something clicking where Jota is just absolutely dominating games. He's coming up with the assists and the goals. I can see it coming. I think there was touches of that against Hearts. And between now and the end of the season, 9 games I think we've got. If we get through against St Johnstone, he's going to be key for me.
Yeah, I think Brian made a really good point. It's testament to me, Jota's mentality, given the fact that he's been able to come back and contribute the way he has so soon after rejoining. Now, physically, these guys will have access to the best training facilities, the best coaches, the best nutrition, etc. Right, and that's great. You know, we would all benefit from that. And I see where Ridiculizer's coming from, Lee's point, but there's the mental element of that as well. The resilience that when things are not going the way you hoped or you expected, it brings you down. And when it brings you down, you lose things like sharpness, you lose motivation, you lose the desire to go and perform at your best. So it's not just about the physical side. I don't think Jota physically is probably as far away as we expected. Ridiculizer's point has merit in that regard. He's probably a lot fitter than any of us are, with the greatest of respect. But
no probably about it, mate.
But the point is that he's not playing week in, week out, so he's not building up that, what I call that mental familiarity with how to get the best from his game as an individual, how to work best with his teammates. Actually, there was an interview with Nicholas Kuhn I saw this morning. Nicholas Kuhn's talking about the fact that he's now starting to see the connection with him and Jota, and he's looking forward to building that up. It takes time, and it takes time every time you go to a new environment. We all know it. We go to another job. It's an unfamiliar surrounding. It takes you time to find your feet. Now, if you're getting disrupted, and things are not, working out the way you expect, and then that's going on a cycle, then it's just going to build up this kind of mental block that you get. And I talk from experience on that. We've all probably had jobs that we weren't happy in, or we've all been in circumstances where things aren't going our way. you take a hit. You do take a hit, and it takes time to recover from that. What I think you're seeing now with Jota is you're seeing a player where that's turned. That element is turned. He's in a place where he feels wanted. He's in a place where he feels he can contribute. He feels valued. I think there's testament to the manager and the coaching staff and his teammates for that as well. I think there's a lot to be said for the way the fans have responded to him, which is fantastic. And so all those things in combination, after 2 or 3 years where he thought he was maybe going on to the next stage of his career and it's stagnated and it's came back, and he's not proud enough to have that self-recognition and self-reflection to say, that didn't work out. I'm going back somewhere which I appreciated and I'm going to continue appreciating. And when you put all those things together, I've got no issue with the guy shedding a few tears after that first game back and scoring that goal. We covered the game. I was nearly in tears watching it, similar to Brian. So, no, it's not something to be derided. I've got no problem with someone feeling so accepted and feeling like they've got that second chance and they're doing it at our club. So, fair play to him. I'll never deride him for that. And I feel privileged that we've got a player like him back at us and wanting to perform well for us.
As well, Chris, sorry, Paul, you mentioned a good point about work, and that's their job, right? So to us, they're these heroes, there's these athletes, there's these footballers, and it's a different type of job, but it's still their job, and everybody has good days and bad days at work, right? Every day, sometimes, Chris and I work in similar industries. Sometimes you write a paper and you go, oh, that's really good. Sometimes you write one, you go, that wasn't that great. These can happen. There's a human element to this as well.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about necessarily, his mentality or whatever, but, it could be the opponent, the pitch, the timing of the game, the way the rest of the players are going, are the rest of the players in form at the right time? Is that a confidence thing? There's so many different factors going into a player, and every player's different. Like Kuhn, we alluded to at the start, it's been a wee bit hot and cold actually after a red hot start to the season. It doesn't mean he's not performing well or he's not hitting the metrics. It's the way they do it. It's a confidence thing. Big E does like that. He's a confidence player. When he bangs in the goals, he tends to do it in patches. Yep. You see that. And when he's out his team, he's not. That's just I suppose that's the skill in being a manager, right? Is managing that, knowing these personalities, knowing these players. It's what Andrew still talk about, and Brendan talks about it as well. Is you're not much managing players, you're managing people and understanding their needs and what makes them confident in how you bring that up. And just to throw in the mix, big Engels as well. So I've been a huge fan of his for the start of the season. I think some of the criticism has been madness, and I think he's actually, when he's performed well, he's been excellent. You can really see the class. But again, he's going to be up and down. He's just moved country. He's a young guy. He's getting to know his teammates. There's a lot of expectation on him. He's playing in sort of different tweaked positions sometimes throughout a game. There's so many different factors, and we've all seen players develop under Rodgers. So these players need time under that manager, under that coach. And again, just the final point, like there was rumours that Kyogo and Rodgers clashed. So you need to also take into account as well how well they got on with the manager. Are they listening to the message? Do they get it? Is it just a clash of personalities? So there's so many factors before we judge players, I think. And I think we need to bear that in mind sometimes.
You're right. The other occasion that came to my mind, I'm going back to Peter Grant, one of the most emotional Celtic players in my lifetime. After we beat Airdrie in the 1995 Scottish Cup final, big Pierre Van Hooijdonk with the header, Tosh McKinley with the assist. One of the worst cup finals I've ever watched, but we won the game. Grant in tears at the end. And that's because it meant so much to him. So, yeah, this is the thing that on the back of the Flying Haggis' comment the other day, and I'm glad he made the comment because it allowed you to explain what Celtic means to you as this entity, what it actually means. And what I was trying to describe is the fact that it plays with your emotions. What other football club does that? None, in my mind. And that's why you can only support one football team. I've never understood anybody who supports more than one, but that's their bag. Only one football team plays with my emotions. Makes you positive, negative, Chris. I feel you're getting the same vibe. And then when you see another player who, even just for that moment, is touched by the football club in the same way, you're thinking, they get it. They absolutely get it.
Do you know, the great example of that. And probably a good segue into it, as I was lucky enough to attend Jim Orr's latest production.
That was seamless, Brian. That was seamless. What a segue that was.
That's why you do the press conferences, sir. That's why you're the headliner.
Jim, we're getting no bad at this.
Speaking into your ear, if you got a wee mic in your lug, it's here in the green room, right?
That's why I grow the hair. So you can't see what's in my ear. No, like it was a privilege to be at the show last night. Jim allowed me and my good lady to go along, and very fortunately met quite a few of the Acsom community there as well. A lot of the guys who comment, and you and Boy Martin Davey, various others. They're all really good people, and it was a fantastic show. But and by the way, real credit to Jim for what he wrote. It's an unbelievable production. Everybody that's going over the next few nights will really enjoy it. But on the show itself, it's a very it's a very small production in the sense that everything takes place in kind of one location. It's a small core group of characters, but what comes across in abundance is the emotion that we as Celtic fans have for the club. And nothing resonated more than going through that period in the late 80s into the 90s, where suddenly we were all at sea, our expectations being lowered. We were maybe winning the odd game against Rangers, but they were absolutely dominating. We were doing nothing in the league, and the club was being run badly. And yet there were people who had loyalty to the board, and the Kellys, etc., who were there. And it was incredible to see the different emotions that the characters portrayed in going through that period. You had the younger fans who were clamouring for change. You had the older fans who were saying it will sort itself out, we've been through it. But how much it meant to people to go through that process. And people will say it's a football team, it's a game of football, it doesn't matter. Wrong, because it's not just about the football club, it's about what the club was built on, the foundations that the club was built on, what it meant to people. When other things were going wrong in people's life, there was a unity amongst Celtic, there was a togetherness about Celtic, and this really comes across incredibly well in the play. And credit to the cast for that across. Des McLean is absolutely incredible performer, as we know, but he's supporting cast there. And apologies, I can't remember all the names. I think one was Sarah Cardle, I think, who was incredible in the performance. But the response that the audience had to what they were seeing, all the real life clips, and I got to see a young Jim Orr, which was a shock to the system.
It looks like Gordon Strachan, 1986.
Jim Orr no longer gets to slag me about my hairstyle, by the way. Never again after what I did last night, back in the 90s. But you're seeing all these real life events, and you're seeing how that process played out, and then you see the catalytic effect of Fergus coming in, the Save Ourselves. It didn't happen immediately, but when it did happen, and what that's now led to in terms of this period of domination. But what I took away from the show in particular was we mustn't take for granted the good times that we're in as Celtic supporters, as a club. We should never get so used to success that it doesn't always, feel like the greatest thing in the world, because there are times potentially in the future where it might not necessarily always be the case. And it does mean so much to people. So always appreciate the good times when they're there. But it also means, as a supporter, don't stand still and accept less than the club is worth. So that really came across. It was phenomenal.
Well done, Jim, and everybody that's going to the show over the next few nights. I hope you enjoy it. Talking about having that kind of spiral at work and no enjoying your work and no really enjoying your job. I had a period like that myself from the age of 17 to 42. So for 25 years, I hated my jobs, hated it. I never speak about Celtic, and I love it. So just to share that with you, there was no job that I wanted to do, but I did it. But I hated them all. They were all absolutely horrific. So if any of my bosses out there are watching this, I don't miss you. In relation to Jota, sorry guys, in relation to Jota, this is a player who was on the verge of international recognition. He was in the long squad. He was in the long list for the squad for the Portuguese national team, having obviously played through the underaged sides. So again, when you're thinking about the trajectory of his career being so steep, having come to Celtic, when you also consider as a young player, he was one of these prodigies that Benfica slapped on a sell-on clause of 50 million quid on Jota when he was a young player in the academy, right? And so it was going up and up and up. It comes to sell, it's continuing. He's almost breaking it, and then it just absolutely crashed and burned. So I think you're right, Chris. It takes a long time for most people to overcome that, unless you're some kind of psychopath who can switch off emotions and all that. It takes a long time. So I'm delighted with the way he's been able to adapt back to life at Celtic. Colin Bean, you're watching on YouTube. This is a crunch transfer window. If the board don't deliver, then I don't think that Brendan Rodgers will extend his contract with us. It's an interesting take, that, because I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think that it's one of the things, don't rest on your laurels. Go again every single time. And you move into that transfer window when it comes and you think, right, we know one bit of business that's been done, Kieran Tierney, and we're guessing that Taylor, I think it's a good enough assumption to make that Taylor will be on his way. Beyond that, I think that we need to also add another 4 players into the squad. And if someone leaves, we need to replace them as well. So you're right, it is a crunch transfer window, no doubt about it. We've got John Keenan on the YouTube. I think it is OK, blast from the past, and probably a bestseller. We're talking about the jersey. And that game that I mentioned in Lyon was one of the games that always springs to mind for obvious reasons. M. Young, afternoon, boys and girls. Great to be back north of the border after golfing week away. Reason I brought that up is, you know this, right? Not bad to get away for a week golfing. Was it all about the golfing, or is that just an excuse to get away? You said it, Brian. For anybody listening in on the audio later on, Brian did the old Paul Merson goal celebration there for a moment. Remember that one? You know this, right? It's bizarre. I have never in my life played golf. I might be good. I don't know. I've never played it. There you go. But everybody I speak to that's into it is right into it. You know, they're like obsessive about the sport of golf. I have never played. Big John, Frank McAvenny, he loves his golf. Something I've never done. Who knows? Maybe when I'm retired, I'll have a shot and then think to myself, why didn't I get into this earlier? I don't know. Good for the exercise as well. Before they go into the, what is it called, the club shop or whatever. Celtic follower, afternoon, all quite like the leaked top. Reminds me of the top Larson was wearing when he got his leg break versus Lyon. And every time I see that as well, the man helping him, not just in a physical sense, but to actually calm him down and talk him through it, is Brian Scott, the physiotherapist who came to Celtic from Aberdeen. He was brought to Celtic by Billy McNeil, who obviously got to know him at Aberdeen. And he was the first qualified physiotherapist Celtic had in our history, Brian Scott. And he was still there when Martin O'Neill won the treble and everything else, and he enjoyed some really, really good times. And I thought to myself, what an interview he would be for This Is Acsom, Brian Scott, the physio. And of course, he spent a lot of time with Neely Mockin. He loved Neely. And I met up with Brian. I met up with him. And we had a right good discussion that lasted over 2 hours about his time at Celtic. And amazing tales. If you think about the rehabilitation of Henrik Larsson, Morten Vikhorst's rehabilitation from serious illness. Mark Reaper coming back from serious injury. The end of Paul McStay's career through injury. The end of Stevie Murray's career, if you remember that young player that was a midfield player that we signed from Nottingham Forest in the late 80s. And he's got so much to talk about. And I was 99% sure that he was going to come on the show and talk about his Celtic career, but he decided not to. And I don't think he's given many interviews in the past, but it was a great discussion. I probably asked him everything that was going to be on the show in that 2-hour discussion over several pots of tea. But a big shout out to Brian Scott, one of these guys in the background at Celtic who was so pivotal in so many different ways. Lads, we've digressed so many times today, and that's fine. But we do have a big game at the weekend. Brian, I want you to tell me your thoughts. I've been calling it a dress rehearsal all week, going into this game against St Johnstone's. You know, JP pitched something to me yesterday, which overnight I've been thinking about it, and I quite like the idea of this because I'm a massive Bernardo fan. The midfield tomorrow, I had said, right, it's your strongest midfield. It's Engels, McGregor, Hatate. But JP got me thinking about removing Hatate and bringing in Bernardo and how that would look. If I was to play that, Brian, and I'm not saying I would, but if I was to play that, Bernardo would be my defensive mid. I would play Callum left of centre with Engels right as centre, and Engels, Johnston and Kuhn being that mechanism on the right-hand side, and Schlupp, McGregor and Jota doing the same on the left. And the more I think about it, the more I like that. I'm a big Hatate fan, don't get me wrong. But I would be interested to see how that would work. Brian, what's your predicted 11? How do you see it going this weekend?
So just on the Bernardo thing, I thought when we signed him, I think I remember saying at the time that I felt we were signing him as a 6. It felt like it made more sense to me, but also he's played a bit further forward. But I agree with you. I always think McGregor further forward is so exciting. The problem is he's kind of the best player in a couple of positions, probably, which is to his detriment at times. But I think you need to play your strongest 11 until the title's wrapped up. Because we know it's for all intents and purposes it's been done. We've been saying that since early February, but it's not done yet. So I think play your strongest 11, get it done, and go over the line. Just be professional. And then I think, as I said, sort of after it's clinched, then you can rotate a wee bit. We have you to the Scottish Cup. So I don't imagine we make a lot of changes, maybe 1 or 2, depending on injuries or form or whatever. But I think actually St Johnstone have played pretty decent stuff at times since the new gaffer came in. They're actually not a bad footballing side, despite their position in the table, which probably suits us. It probably doesn't, hold any much hope against us. But I think actually it's probably a game that suits Hatate, where he's got maybe a bit more space and a bit more time. So I probably wouldn't do too much rotation at all.
No, it's at that bit. And Jungle Lion in the comment section always says it, and Jim Orr's the same. Just play your strongest team. Absolutely get it. I'm not a massive critic of Hatate. I think that within a game, it can look as though he's having a bad game and then he does something, or he gets better as the game goes on.
He can just give you something that no one else in the team can give you.
Absolutely.
And he's a bit like Samaras, where Samaras, you knew in the first couple of minutes if he was going to be rotten or an absolute world beater. But Hatate's like that in game. He can fluctuate. So I think like you kind of always have to have him, I think just because he can just do something bang and win your game in a second.
Sometimes in the last 10 minutes, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Chris, I don't know, it's not been confirmed yet, but will you be joining me at the weekend to cover the game?
You asking?
Always. Are you dancing?
I think yes. What Francie Joe said there. No, I think as long as people aren't fed up with seeing me this week, then I'll be more than happy to join you on Sunday.
We are not fed up seeing you. Green Machine, couple of wee comments before we go. Kuhn needs to mix his play up, needs to go down the outside sometimes as he's getting picked off a lot going inside. J. Conley J. Larkin mentions that Stevie Murray was part of that reserve team with Charlie Christie, Ryan's old fella. You know what? I would love to speak to Stevie Murray on This Is Acsom. He was brought up in conversation yesterday Wednesday when we spoke to Frank McAvenny. Because what happened was Macca jokes that the reason they were so keen to score the winning goal in the game against Dundee United was because they had a holiday booked, a 2-week holiday booked. They were going over to somewhere in Spain, and it was people like Alan McKnight was one of them, Derek White, who loved the sun and a wee sunbed now and again, I think. He was one of them, and he said that some of the younger guys, Stevie Murray went on that trip and all that as well. And I don't know if it was an interview, I need to double check, or if it was before the camera started rolling. I says, he was meant to be some player, Frank. And Frank was saying, oh, yeah, he was brilliant. Because he played under Brian Clough at Nottingham Forest, and then Celtic brought him up. He had a terrible knee injury against Motherwell in a reserve game. Desmond Tinney, yes, I do remember the oxygen recovery tank. You remember that? The hyperbolic chamber. Right. And there was a picture of Paul McStay in it. And you're thinking, is that the same one that Michael Jackson uses? Remember, there was all the rumours. Yeah. He sleeps in a hyperbolic chamber, and it helped you, right? Apparently, it was only one, certainly in Scottish football, but possibly in British football at the time. So Celtic was so backwards in so many ways. I mean, the jungle toilets, yet we had a hyperbolic chamber, right? And I always remember it because people are like, yeah, it's great for recovery. And, if you've got an injury, it'll cut down on the recovery time. But then I heard from a player that it was even better for hangovers. So they would come in the morning and try and get Brian Scott's key so they could go in if they'd had a few jars the night before, and they were like, that's pure oxygen, no hangover.
There must have been a queue. Some of the stories I've heard, there must have been a queue to try and get into it.
I was just thinking this podcast is a bit like a hyperbolic chamber of drama on it, to be fair.
A hangover cure. There you go, a hangover cure.
I'll take that.
Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. As always, 1,400 strong. Have we got something else to throw in there, Chris?
Just when I noticed that actually at the start of the podcast, one of the regular viewers, Magnet67, had indicated not being on because he'd sadly lost his mother. So I just wanted to, pass on our deepest sympathies for that. And it's a really, really tough thing to go through. So, yeah, we're all with you, Magnet67. All the best.
Absolutely, my friend. And you talked about the unity, the common unity, the community that you can feel, even with something as simple as just getting together with a few Celtic fans, because I've seen a lot of comments of support as well. So keep the chin up, pal. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved. And join us again tonight at 6 o'clock on the channel for a Celtic State of Mind.
Maka.